Hi, bro. What's up?
Just hanging out, man. Hanging out in our space that we've created that I'm super proud of.
Yeah. So why don't you just let's start there, right there, where this space is insane. So you just decided one day that you were going to renovate this garage and do like a cold tub, a sauna type idea.
Yeah, so it goes back to a much larger vision, and so it kind of unfolded a little randomly. But I've been on a journey for 3 years. I've been sober. I don't drink. We can get into that later. But my girlfriend and I would go to these Russian bathhouses on the weekend. And we did them in many countries, like 20 plus countries. So all over Europe. We were living in Berlin, in San Francisco. And every time we would go, it was the same sort of story. It's like, you know, a little bit dingy, not a lot of thought about the education around the process, the music, the lighting, but amazing experience. And so every time I'd wake up, it was like, wow, like why were those conversations so good? And didn't really know why at the time, but just knew like I felt great. And craziest things started happening. We would take people at these crypto conferences, and then like the next conference there would be more people, and the next one more, until there's like, you know, chat groups about like Russian banyas in the crypto scene. And so I was like, well, this is really weird but cool. And so I started bringing some friends in Toronto. And for 3 years, we went to Southwestern Bathhouse, really cool spot on Dundas Street, kind of in Etobicoke. Yeah, it's a cool vibe, a lot of fun. And one of my friends was like, look, man, I really want to build this. I've been driving out here for 2 years. It's pretty far. Like, you know, the experience is good, but like we can do something better. And so I thought about it for a while, and I actually just left my job at the Ethereum Foundation in crypto like a couple weeks ago to do this full time. And so I actually moved back to Toronto to focus on this full time. And so when I was living in this house, I was taking a shower. I'm like, oh, there's no cold water. Like, what the hell? So I called a plumber, tried to get the water cold, and there was just basically no way to make the water ice cold without like huge expense. So I was like, well, what if I put, buy an ice bath for my backyard? So looked online, found this like ice bath company called Morozko Forge, talked to them, and figured by the time we got their product here, it was going to cost 10 grand. I was like, it's a little bit excessive for an ice bath, but you know what? I'm going to reach out to them anyway. So sent them an email, got on the phone, and was like, hey, why don't you just come up to Toronto? I'll host you. I'll pay for your flight. You can like check it out over the July 4th long weekend. You've never been to Canada, and we'll build the thing together. And my partners were like, you know, they're going to tell you to fuck off. There's no way, like a business owner's not going to come up here. And sure enough, they responded and were like, yeah, we'll come. So they come up to my house, and I ordered all the gear. Like I've never even used any of these tools, like table saw and a miter saw, and like the filtration system and the copper coiling, and like this entire parts list they sent me. I spent like 5 days on Amazon and going to pool repair shops and, you know, plumbing shops and getting HVAC people to get these parts for me. And we end up building the ice bath over like a 3-day period in this garage. It was just like empty, and putting it outside. And the idea was like, okay, if we're going to build this center and put like our huge financial resources towards it between me and my partners, then like, what if nobody comes, you know? And then you start doubting that what you're creating is like, is great. And so it was like, in tech, we always put out like an MVP, like a minimum viable product. So you want to see like, will people use what you're doing? And so we had this ice bath in the backyard, and people just start showing up. And at first there's like nothing around it. It's kind of like get in. And, you know, people are lasting 30 seconds, but still friends are messaging me like, yo, I want to come back. I want to drop in. And so I'm getting like 2 to 3 people a day dropping in. And as people come, we start like kind of iterating on it. So Harry and Amanda, who you met, our other partners, are like, yo, we have these like really dope essential oil kits. And so we start kind of letting people rub essential oils on them to kind of bring them into the present moment. This like sense of smell helps them go beyond this like really intense sense of touch. And so that happens, and people are now kind of staying in for a minute. Then they like bring by, you know, somebody had a Koshi chime and a sound bowl, and so we start using that, and that's helping people again as an anchor to like stay in longer. Now all of a sudden people are in for like 2 to 3 minutes. And so we start doing more research about like what's happening in the body, and then, you know, we have this whole prep all of a sudden. And it really, to me, was like, this is kind of how great products start. It's like you put something out, you watch people using it, you just like tirelessly tweak and improve it over time. which kind of brings us to this garage. So we have, you know, a bit of a long story, but
No, it's great. Yeah.
we have this garage. And so we're thinking like, well, we have this ice bath outside and all these people are coming. What are we going to do in the wintertime? Right. And so we look in the garage, and my aunt's a designer. And so we're like, hey, can you give us some help, like building this little space? And in our minds, we're like, well, it's, you know, it'll just be for 10 friends to kind of have memberships, and we'll use it as a communal space, and then we can have the space to have events. And so we start building it out. We have like a contractor. We do like this cedar flooring, you know, decide like, oh, we should get a sauna too, put in a shower so people like can have multiple people. And as it starts getting built out, we realize like, whoa, this is like way cooler than we expected. Like we weren't really expecting that much. And we're like, well, why don't we build a website? So my girlfriend just jumps in, takes pictures, builds like a Squarespace site on her own, integrates it with MindBody. And now all of a sudden we're like, oh, we have a booking system. And so then we're kind of like, well, like, can we do this legally? So we, you know, get some lawyers and to look at it, and we end up getting insurance and a business license. And it turns out we have a small business. Right. And so before this like mega center opens next year, we actually have a bookable small business recovery center. So it's a bit of a different goal than the larger center, but it just sort of happened by like trying to provide a really good product experience to our friends, which to me, after building products for 15 years, it just feels like super organic, authentic, and like real. So that's sort of the story of what it is and how it came to be.
Man. Yeah, wow. Yeah, and so now, I mean, first of all, this place is amazing. So you're obviously going to keep this running, and like people are going to come and like check it. They can register online right now, essentially.
Yeah. So there's a website. We're open now from 5 to 9 p.m. So every night, sort of 8:30 to 10, 8 to 10 is an orientation. So if it's your first time, you need to come for an orientation, learn about, you know, what are the benefits of the ice bath, how to get in the ice bath, how to prepare, what are the benefits of the sauna, how to get in. You get to meet some of the community, do a little share. We're really trying to like look at it as like hand-to-hand onboarding, where the owners of the facility, the creators of the facility are there walking you through, teaching you about the culture that we want to create, not only in this facility, but the bigger facility as well. And we expect to run this as a business and open multiple versions of this. And so the idea behind this one is kind of like you would come, you know, 3 times a week, and it's a supplement to your workout routine. So it's all about like recovery, environmental training. We can talk about that if that's interesting, but it's just like using the hot and cold to heal and strengthen your body. And so you might come in with a group of 4, you might come in on your own, and it's called inward. It's about like going inward. And so a lot of people, meditation is not really achievable. It's difficult. Maybe they use an app, or maybe they're just like, I've tried that. It's not for me. This is like, you come to this place, you're having amazing healing effects on your body, but it's also very introspective. So you're in a bathing suit, so there's no phone. So naturally, not having your phone for an hour, you know, that in itself is huge. You give your mind a bit of time to relax, and then the ice is just so powerful for like removing all thoughts. And so the goal of this place is just, hey, 2 to 3 times a week, you're coming. Maybe it's in a community aspect. We do some classes too, but mostly it's just, you know, getting out of your own head, relaxing, while also getting these benefits that are similar to a workout. And I think people are like, you know, dying for something like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, I've been here 3 times now, and like, it's quite the experience, and nothing like it exists. And I've mentioned this to you before too. It's like, I think people are, like you said, they are dying for this kind of experience. So yeah, maybe just talk about the benefits of a cold plunge, because the first time I was here, you really dove into it really well, and I actually forget a little bit, but I know it's good.
Man.
Yeah,
awesome. So the best way to do it, I found that people remember, is like explaining what's happening to your body. So the backstory around this, and like I think we're at the very start of a trend where if you had thought of like keto 5 years ago and look at where it is now, I think the same thing's happening with environmental training. The environmental training is putting your body out of homeostasis to encourage results, and it's called eustress. So very similar to when you work out, you're putting your body through stress, and it has these hormonal responses that create more resilience. Hot and cold do exactly the same thing. And if you think about our bodies, like our ancestors' bodies, for the entire history of human evolution outside of the last 80 years, we haven't had control of our environment. So it'd be very common for you to be walking around with like an animal skin pelt in the full winter. So our bodies can actually handle extreme cold. And so that's kind of like, because we're not exposed to these different temperatures, we've lost a bit of our resilience.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of research. Rhonda Patrick is a great resource for more about what's happening. But there's a lot of research. People like Wim Hof, people like Laird Hamilton, who's a big wave surfer, people like Brian McKenzie out in California training Olympic athletes. It's sort of the beginning of this curve of where I think all athletes will understand that like 2 to 3 times a week they should be doing extreme cold, extreme hot, and it'll give them an edge.
Yeah.
As you're seeing this now with like NHL players using ice baths. A lot of athletes have known about ice baths,
Right.
but it goes so far beyond just recovery. So that's sort of the backdrop of like where all this is taking place. Now, what's happening specifically is like you get in the ice and your body's going into fight or flight mode. So your brain is legitimately saying like, hey, this could be dangerous.
Yeah.
So what happens is your body, your blood vessels start to constrict. So all your heat is trapped in your core. And how that happens, your brain triples the amount of this neurotransmitter called norepinephrine. And norepinephrine is the neurotransmitter responsible for like mood, attention, vigilance. It's an adrenal effect.
Right.
It's your body like, hey, get in the present, right?
Right.
And so what's happening is like you just feel amazing.
Yeah.
So the first 30 seconds, super tough. You're breathing. You're trying to hyperventilate, right? And so as soon as you control your breathing, you get through that 30 seconds to 1 minute, this norepinephrine response happens, and it's just like, bam, surrender, relaxation. And as a result, it's like the impact of having a coffee or something like that, where you have this response that's just makes you feel alive. So that's the mood. Now, the other benefits of norepinephrine, it's extremely anti-inflammatory. So it blocks inflammation pathways.
Right.
So our bodies now, because of exposure to the environment, to our diets, to stress, are overinflamed, chronically overinflamed for most people. Our immune systems are generally overactive. It's like using like a nuclear bomb
Right.
in response to these like small impacts.
Right.
And so because it's anti-inflammatory, it's just categorically positive. So that's why you see athletes doing this, because the reduced inflammation increases recovery, it reduces pain.
Yeah.
Now, if you're like, oh, well, big deal, inflammation. Well, inflammation is responsible for premature aging. It stops production of serotonin in the brain, makes it harder to be happy.
Right.
It's responsible for or has a hand in 70% of diseases, things like rheumatoid arthritis. So it's like categorically positive that, instead of taking a pill, you can just sit in this cold and this happens.
Yeah.
Now, there's also an impact on your immune system. So it varies. It increases the variability of your white blood cell stack, which is like one of the leading indicators of people that live to over 100. So anything that can do that is like amazing. Functionally in your body, so this norepinephrine, I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but it shuts down the electrical gradient across your mitochondria. So mitochondria, you have this in every cell. It's like the thing that's generating, it's actual bacteria that's generating the energy in your cells. It's converting food to energy. So when this electrochemical gradient shuts down, your mitochondria is saying like, hey, I need to survive. And so the only way it can survive, it eats your white fat.
Right.
So these mitochondria in your brown fat cells eats your white fat to create heat. So that's how your body actually heats up. It's called thermogenesis. And so what that does, it triples your metabolism. So if you're thinking about like losing weight, body composition, it's just so interesting to me that your body actually eats its own fat to create heat. And then finally, they've done a bunch of studies on animals and hibernation, and they see the cold creates these cold shock proteins in your brain. So this is super interesting because your brain is a combination of like trillions of neurons connected by synapses. And the synapses is where like memory and learning is stored, and these things just die over time. You have a limited amount, and they're always breaking down. As you get older, the rate of breakdown is much faster. And it's shown that cold shock proteins can help protect against degradation of the synapses. So like super interesting that you can potentially protect against cognitive decline from both cold and hot. So those are all the physical benefits. So just like quick summary, there's the boosted mood, which alone for me is worth it. The reduced inflammation, the increased immune system, the increased metabolism, the protection against neurodegeneration. It's like, 2 minutes of your time to get that kind of impact. I don't think there's anything else you can do on the planet, including exercise, that has that kind of hormonal impact on your body. And then there's like the mental impact, right? So you did the ice bath yourself, and you can give a quick feedback of what it was like today, which might be cool for people listening. But You get in there and it's like stimulus. Like you're just like, I'm facing like, this is crazy. Like the first time I did it, I was just like seeing pink, and I was like, what is happening? And so you really have to realize like, okay, this is what cold feels like, and let go and surrender. It's kind of a tool that's like a forced meditation. So I've seen people here like, 20 years I haven't been able to meditate. I just can't sit still and focus. And they're like, and this was the first time my thoughts just quieted. And so what you start to learn is like, okay, this is cold, but I have a choice. I can react or I can let go. And so what it sort of trains you to do is like, oh, here's anger coming. I can yell, or I can just see it's anger. Here's anxiety. I can cry or get afraid, or I can just let go. And so it's sort of a hack, let's call it a physical hack, to get into meditative state without requiring the meditation. And so for people who are first timers, have really crazy mind, have trouble quieting down, it's like the best tool or tactic I've seen mentally. And even if there was no physical benefits, just for that like mental experience, I would do it. And then, I would love to hear your feedback on this also, but it's not just like getting into an ice bath, Yeah. I've had athletes here who are like, wow, I can't believe you've made this into like a good experience. Like this was like torture for us for 10 years. And it's, we've combined this whole thing about this present moment, setting an intention, using this time when your mind is quiet to like encourage mental strength. And, we combine it with aromatherapy when you get in, sound healing when you get in, all these other elements to make it into like a real personal journey. And I think that's kind of what makes this special, is that it's not a recovery center. It's like Soho House aesthetic combined with recovery elements that like brings you into the present moment.
Yeah, totally agree, man. It's it is much more. And actually, Harry and Amanda and I were talking about spaces and like creating and cultivating spaces for really like experiences that we're just not going to have on our day to day, and they're really extreme experiences even, And for me, I look for the extremes, and because I find that as I discover the extremes on each spectrum, I actually can really expand my awareness and understand like, well, where is it? Where am I? Like it's a nice reference point for whatever it is for how we experience life, And so, cold and hot is one example of an extreme, like movement and stillness, another example. Right. And this is kind of what drew me to this so much, was like, yeah, this makes sense. And yeah, maybe just giving even a little bit about my experience today. Like, so this is the third time I've done it. This was actually the most difficult, as I was telling you. And I only did 2 minutes today, where previously I did 4. But as I went in, it was that like insane fight or flight. Yeah. And it was like, to be honest, it kind of felt like a birth trauma. It felt like I was being born, and it was like, oh shit, and yeah, and it's just, really in the last week, I've been kind of more on the quicker end of things, just because I'm going away for a few months and like trying to get things going and organized before I leave and all that. And so I tend to get into more of an anxious and it's not sleeping as well and all that stuff. And when you come into the cold tub, it's like all of that has to drop immediately, So I think the first 2 times I came in a little more relaxed, which allowed me to surrender more. But it was a nice experience today, just noticing how certain parts of my body were holding on and didn't want to let go and didn't want to surrender. And you're just forced to bring awareness to that and really look at it and just really, you don't have the choice. You kind of like, you can fight it and it's going to be uncomfortable, but that's what I love about this practice, is like, it is that kind of dance between the parts of you that want to fight it and resist, and then the spaciousness of noticing that and just being with it, not unlike, a Vipassana retreat or something like that, but just on a quicker time scale here,
So coming in with more thoughts in your head, like, how do you feel now?
I feel a lot calmer for sure. Yeah. Just even not thinking too much outside of, I think, not thinking about like, oh, there are all these things I need to do, and so not needing to like futurize right now, and just like being here is like, it's fine, like I'm going to see my girlfriend after this. I can feel, it's like, oh, this is gonna be a good weekend. So Yeah, more chill for sure. Yeah.
I'm starting to think, I kind of have this theory that like these states, these extreme states you're talking about, like finding these extremes, they weaken the defenses of the ego in ways. And as a result, you can start to reprogram patterns.
Right.
So psychedelics do that. But I really think the cold, your mind shuts down. You're not thinking. You just mentioned like, I'm not thinking about these tasks. And as a result, it's like, what are you thinking about? Right. And so you can start thinking like, you know, I radiate love, or I'm a leader, or I'm brave, or whatever it is. You can start to like reprogram patterns that are defense mechanisms you built up over time. Right. And so I'm really starting to think or find like in my own practices, anything that can like weaken the defenses of the ego, of the default mode network is just, you know, it should be sought out by like everybody, so you can start to kind of actually make changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the way I would interpret that and look at it is like these parts of us that are, you know, let's say egoic. Like I typically just use the word parts just because I would call them our manager parts in that's IFS language.
Yep.
And, you know, so that part of me that's like really working really fast and like needs to get all this stuff done. It's a manager part of me that really wants to like help out and do shit. And it's a great part of me, you know, but what happens is like it believes in this role so deeply, and it really believes that this is me, and it really like becomes me. So it actually doesn't give space for any of these other parts of me that, you know, maybe want to do other things, or maybe want to, because it really feels like it has to do this. And so we get so entrenched and like entangled within this role, and sometimes it's hard to come out of it. You know, sometimes it's hard to just take a moment and give other parts some space, you know, like a part of us that just wants to chill because that part believes so much that it has to do that. So the cold tub really allows that. It just kind of like tells that part like, hey, you're not the only one here. You know, there's actually like all these other things that are happening. And so because that part isn't very present moment aware, right? It's like actually future aware. And it's like all it's thinking about is like getting tasks done or whatever. And again, it's like, I don't call it the ego just because like that's a great, like, thank God for that part of me, right? It's a really good part of me, but it's just when it takes over the system, it could start to create like inner conflict and chaos, right? So that's just what I love about this practice. And really like this is kind of what I look for in life, is like, what are the practices that can actually allow me to bring more, what we would call self energy, more like connection, compassion, love towards these parts, and give them the space to do what they need, but also like really be listening to all the other parts that want to do what they want to do. Right. Yeah. So now you're actually going to be building out a big center.
Yeah. So, you know, the recovery and these health aspects and this like mental state I just mentioned are amazing for personal growth, but there's a bigger vision. There's something I'm more excited about. And if you think of social interaction, like it hasn't evolved in like 30 years. So how many times is a friend like, oh, let's go get a drink, or like, let's go to a restaurant? And what happens at a restaurant? You know, 6 people are there, your phones are all out. Even if you check your phone once every 15 minutes, it means that somebody's checking like once every 3 minutes. So it just means people aren't present in the conversation. And I really believe these phones are like taking over our lives in a few ways. So one, the colors on the phone, like they really change the dopamine trajectory in the brain. Looking at social media changes the dopamine trajectory in the brain. And so what this means is just it's much more difficult to be relaxed and to be happy. And I think people don't really notice because this is happening so gradually. And so I've just noticed that like social interaction, like it's not evolving the way it should be. Same as like, you know, if you wanted to change your diet now, there's tons of options. If you want to go to a fitness class, there's all these boutiques. If you like, there's a limited amount of things, but there hasn't been something socially that has like really had an impact, in my opinion. And so I think this hot and cold puts you in one of these states to be social. So I mentioned this neuroepinephrine, right? And so what happens? You're super alert. Bam, you're a better listener. You know, your mood is elevated. What does that mean? You're more vulnerable. You're in the sauna, you're captive, there's no phones. These are like perfect situations to encourage conversation. And this is what was happening that we didn't know until now, until we did the research, but this is what was happening in these banyas I mentioned is 40 people are coming, and why do they feel good? It's because this norepinephrine is boosting in their brain, there's no phone, they start talking. And it's not the normal conversation like, hey man, how was work? Or like, did you see sports? It's like, I'm legit sad because my brother's sick. Or like, I'm feeling uncomfortable in my relationship. It's like these crazy conversations. And not only that, it's conversations with strangers. And so you like start to learn something. And so I thought like somebody needs to build a social experience around this. And you do see it in spas. There's some places like Scandinave, Nordique, and they're cool, but they're for relaxation. It's a different vibe. Like we really want to build something social. And while inward is geared towards recovery in the present moment, the big center, we haven't named it yet, but the big center is geared to a brand new social experience. The idea is you do this hot and cold. In the hot, you'll have performance elements. So these performance elements, like a 45-person sauna, where there's a sauna master explaining the educational benefits of like why you should be doing this multiple times, but also putting on a show. So what's that? Ice bowls, frozen, filled with aromatherapy essential oils being put on the burner, increasing your sense of smell. Dancing and towel waving, sound healing bowls, playing music, starting to weave in these other elements that for the mainstream may seem on their own a little bit like hokey, but when put into a performance setting are just incredible. So a lot of things I've actually learned about this summer, like the essential oils and the sound bowls and the tuning forks, like they're incredible, right? And so you go and you see this spectacle, you feel amazing, and then you chat. And so then we're going to put you in a sort of restaurant-like area. So like imagine tea ceremonies, sitting on the floor at a low table, learning about tea, talking, drinking and eating things that replenish your body. So bone broths, cacao ceremonies, Chinese medicine elixirs, green juices, small bites, things that make you feel great. So you kind of come in, you relax, you let your worries go, you have an amazing conversation, you get replenished. And to me, this is like, it's not a fitness class, it's competing with bars and restaurants. It's a totally new social experience. And then like what type of people do you have in this community? So there's like athletes who are interested, biohackers, there's people from the psychedelic space who want to be in the present moment, there's meditators, there's stressed entrepreneurs. And so I think you're attracting customers at the start of all these trends and giving them a place to hang out. And so Soho House is an amazing community spot in Brant's based around alcohol, a little bit of creativity, but alcohol. So where are the spots for people that are based around like these new practices in the present moment? And they don't exist yet. And like the really cool thing I think is like, you go to a float center now or infrared sauna, it's done like kind of on your own and it's great. I love these experiences, but what about putting these into like a Soho House aesthetic, right? So you're going and it's cool. It's like somewhere you want to hang out. And so our huge vision is just to like provide the onboarding point for the mainstream person to have this cool, healthy experience that they're not even going because it's healthy. It's just kind of like a hidden benefit. And then when they're there, you can start teaching them about these things like a meditation retreat, psychedelic therapy, whatever it is, like these states that you're talking about. So I just want to be the leader in like an experiential space to improve social experience. And I think like it's so clear to me that this vision will work and it will work in every city. And so I'm like we're devoting like our entire time, our resources into building this.
Dude, that's sweet. It just got me really excited too. Just
nice.
Yeah, really. I mean, I don't go out, and if I do, it's like with a few friends for dinner, and then like I want to go back home and I want to sleep early, like I really like my sleep. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly a place, I would go, no doubt. But I also think just thinking, we're kind of in this space now with millennials who like, they actually don't even want to drink. It's like drinking's actually like no one, like, I don't know. I don't go to bars anymore. Like, I don't go to clubs. I don't really do that thing. Maybe people do, but I feel like they're probably even getting bored. A lot of people who are going out and like, maybe they're getting bored of that too. And yeah, I really love this whole idea that you're bringing this whole new social experience. I didn't even think of it that way, because it's definitely missing. Yeah, it's not there.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's just happened organically. It's not like something I'm like, hey, we're going to design the social experience. I just haven't gone to banyas, saw this happening. It's like, what is this, And so then that's like in a space that's not even designed for that. Like what happens when you like that's your goal. And so you design the nook and crannies, you design the lighting. Maybe you have activities like here for the orientation. What makes it so special is we have people share. So sometimes we have people share like, what's one health practice that's been working for you for the last 3 months? So if you come and you sit down and you hear 8 people say like, oh, I've been journaling, or I have this like apple cider vinegar and lemon drink in the morning, or like, you know, I went to this particular doctor. Like it's awesome. You start realizing like, whoa, I just learned about all these cool things, and like I can be healthy. Like everybody wants to be healthier, right? But like I think there's just like a knowledge gap. Like how do I get that info? How do we make it cool? How do I find community around it, right? And so I think that's really cool. Some other stuff that we've seen sort of emerge organically is like tying people together and creating trust, especially amongst strangers. So we have like another practice that we're offering around breathwork that I learned from Giovanni, who I think was also on your podcast. That's been just super, super impactful. And for that practice, we go a little bit deeper. So we have people literally share these 2 things, which like, you know, anyone can copy this at their events. But so one is like the best moment of your year.
Right.
And like you share not just the moment in a story, because people really listen to stories and they can zone in a little better, but you explain the feeling in your body. So like, for example, one guy explained like how he, you know, had been struggling, and then after a period of time, he didn't know if he was in the right direction. For 2 years, he'd been working on in the marijuana cannabis space. And finally, he won a lottery for a store like in Toronto. And he was explaining, you know, what it was like, what his body felt like when he actually opened the computer, you know, looked at the landing page of the winners, saw his name, like high-fived his friends, like, you know, his heart was pumping, and he felt like just a pure, like, white energy, like, beaming through him. They all walked outside, and you're, like, listening to this, and you just are like, wow, life is so amazing, because you just hear these things, right? Which you don't, like, it's a weird thing to say to someone, just your friend. You're not like, yo, what was the best thing that happened to you? It doesn't come up. And then we follow that up with like something you're struggling with. And so, and we want people to be really honest. So like I'll usually go first and say something super vulnerable. And then the idea is to show also that like, hey, you know, life's great, but everybody struggles. So if you wake up tomorrow and you're like, I suck at my job, or my company's going to fail, or I'm not good enough. You just heard 7 people say that last night. And you kind of think like, you know what, this is common, right? Like people struggle. And so, you know, if you talk about like the design space for social experience, how do you weave all that into a way that's not like weird or contrived or like, you know, therapeutic, therapy-ish, you know, we're trying to make it so it's like, that's what's cool. And that's just kind of like evolved in this space. And so I'm like, you know, for anyone listening, if they have ideas about this, I'm looking to incorporate whatever I can, any weird stuff to like see if it sticks and if it helps people connect.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I think there's a lot to test in it because it doesn't exist. And I'm so interested in this because, you know, you and I have probably both been in many environments where we go someplace, it's like a retreat or a workshop or whatever, and then all of a sudden the energy shifts in the room and it's like people become vulnerable. And it's like, well, what is that ingredient? Like, I am so curious about that. And I think what you're doing here is like you are just starting to test it and you're starting to see some things that work towards it. But it's like this thing that's like everyone's at a different place in their life. So it's not going to be a same recipe for every single person, right? But there is something like, first of all, there needs to be a space that feels good. So this is what I've learned. A space that feels good, a space that feels safe. Like everyone has to experience some level of safety, you know, and how do they get to that level of safety? Like maybe it's one person who takes that first step to be vulnerable, to like throw out, like really genuinely be vulnerable, that touches everyone in the room, you know, and then I don't think it's just that one person, but I think someone has to follow that. And it's kind of like, then there's this like cascading effect of everyone's like, whoa, like everyone's here to listen to me, you know, everyone's here to support me. Because in most of our lives, like when we walk around, especially in a big city, it's like actually people are busy and like they're on their way to do certain things, and no disrespect, but like they're not there for you, you know? So, and that's okay. It's nothing wrong with it, but it's like, how do we get these environments and spaces like really what you're building right now, and testing that, and maybe even just like, I'm just very curious, like, what is that recipe? What are the real ingredients to get to that space of vulnerability?
I mean, if you find those ingredients, like that's the you know, amazing question is like then you can create like the best experiences.
Greatest,
and so it's weird because I've seen it work with 8 strangers.
Yeah.
You know, don't know each other and still willing to share.
Yeah.
I've seen it work with people who are like really good friends and they even share stuff that like they don't normally share. So you have people I've seen be like, oh man, it was so nice to hear you talk like that. And it's like, whoa, like in this group setting, you know? So I don't really know what it takes yet. Like we're just kind of starting, but it definitely, the facilitators need to be on point. I think there's some like willing to be like authentic and sharing. There has to be a sense that this isn't for money or like trying to help people. That's the whole goal of like the center in the first place. So like, how do you do that at scale, right? With like a larger environment also, like would it work with if there was like 100 people in the big center and not only 8 here? So I don't really know. I think what we're trying to figure out is like, I'm a huge believer that like you're your own inner healer. You don't need anyone else. You can figure it out. So the question is like, what do you need to enable that, right? And so certain things like just sharing in a group can like excite people, empower people to just like bring something up. The fact that you brought it up and said it can be helpful. So I'm not even claiming to have like 2% of the answer. I'm just claiming that like this is my stated goal. And so I'm so down to create better experiences that people as a group and a community can come and share, because I think like we've lost our communities based on like, you know, people work remote. People are like on social media and virtual spaces all the time. It becomes more and more difficult. Even if you live in a city, like you don't know who your neighbors are. You don't buy food from the same vendors. Everything comes electronically, which has its advantages. But I think there's a huge design space for like, how do we recreate intimacy and community, even in like relationships one-to-one. So yeah, man, I'm glad you're interested in this. We can maybe, you know, do it together, figure out how to improve. Yeah,
man. I'm on board 100% with the fact that we've lost this sense of community, you know, and it's just a sad thing, you know, and and this is why I'm very interested in, you know, what you're doing, what Andrew's doing with Wilderness and you know, like what it takes to create a community and container and really getting clear on like, what are we here for? Like, what are our shared values here? And like, what's this like greater vision of what we're doing? Because I think, you know, really, if a community is going to build, it's understanding that everyone's valuing the same thing, right? So yeah, super interesting, man. I really just love when you talk about this in the process as you're developing this, because like it's so well thought out, and like you're clearly like a brilliant entrepreneur who's just like incredible at thinking about an idea and testing it and like doing the right step at the right time, and like being okay with fucking it up and testing something new. And you know, and it's like it's definitely like a framework in your mind that's there that seems to just come, you know, maybe I don't say naturally to you. You've been an entrepreneur for 15 years or so now, right? So I'm sure you've learned a lot through all those experiences that allow you to actually test this out in a way that can give you the best chance for success, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny you say that, because like all these little things we're doing, it's like, oh, they just happen naturally, but they happen from learning. And so I had a company. My first business was a hardware company, and we built a SIM card that would slip in between like a operating system on a SIM card that would slip in between your SIM and your phone. And basically we could provision you with an identity based on where you traveled. So you're Canadian, you're on Rogers, you go to the US, we could provision you with an AT&T SIM card, and you wouldn't be paying roaming fees, and we would take a markup. And so we built like the operating system on the chip, we built the back end carrier platform, like we built everything from scratch, you know, and all this stuff already existed. Like we could have leased it, and in my mind I didn't know what I was doing, raised money for the project. It ended really badly, but it was a crazy learning experience where I sort of cut my teeth. And so, you know, in this case, we were like, oh, we need to build everything. The product needs to be perfect. It needs to work in an iPhone. It needs to work in a Samsung. You know, a customer from Africa that's going to China needs to work. Like really, once you kind of, you know, you've been around startups, you realize like you just want a hand-to-hand combat, figure out the perfect product for a single use case and expand from there. And so, you know, here, instead of like going and building this entire massive center and adding in all these different elements and think like, is it going to work? It was like, oh, we're going to start with this single ice bath. We're going to get it perfect. And like, I'm spending 5 hours a day, like 1-to-1 with people, just talking to them. And like, that doesn't scale. There's a huge cost to my time to do that. But that's where I'm finding out like, oh, this is how you make people vulnerable, you know? So it's my stated goal before we open 1,000 new relationships.
Nice.
And these aren't like, you know, hey, we messaged once. It's like, man, I'm on your podcast. Like, I'm calling you. Like, hey, man, how's it going? What happened after this? You know? And so I think if you do 1,000 customer relationships, you're going to know how to build the perfect experience. And so just these things you don't really realize before. But so it's just, you know, me failing and failing and failing at other things that have sort of provided some of these learnings.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways I want to go with this right now too, is like, so just talking about 1,000 new relationships, I think like as we were speaking, like we spoke on the phone a few, like maybe 4 or 5 months back. It's when we first chatted. And then the more I just like talk to people, the more they're just like, oh yeah, Robbie Ben, I'm going to go do his ice tub. You know, I'm like, what the fuck? Like everyone knows this guy. Like how, like, and Harry and I were talking about you as this like connector of connectors. It's like and even me and Mike were saying like, you're like the greatest networker of all time, you know? Like, what is it? What do you do? Like, what are you doing? You know, or is it just like hard, like hustle and just like, you know who to get to know?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna get my coffee and then
okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think networking for me is super important. So one, it's just like the first thing I've learned, and mostly from working in crypto, it was dealing with engineers. And like, it didn't matter what the sales pitch was as long as you were working on a hard problem. And like, the harder, the gnarlier the problem, the better. And it's sort of where I learned that like, also an example is like Elon Musk is working on SpaceX. And it kind of seems like, oh, this is going to be the hardest problem to solve. Why would you do that? That's crazy. But then, you know, when you put that hard problem out there, the best people naturally want to come work on it. So in some ways, if you raise money to do this and then work on this hard problem, you actually don't really have any competition versus doing like some e-commerce thing that like has no vision. And so what made really clear to me is like, whatever you do, have like a vision, right? So we're not just opening some bathhouse. We're like trying to change, we're trying to innovate on the social experience. And so that's one, is like have a very, very clear vision. And just know, you know, when we're talking, I can say this to you in a million ways and it's going to come out the same every time because I talk about it so much. I know exactly what I want to create. The next thing is like, make sure it's authentic, right? So like for me, I'm doing this because like I struggled with sobriety. I had no, you know, social network. I needed to create this for myself. So this is like a personal passion. Like I'm into health and wellness and biohacking and meditation. I've done the psychedelics and the retreats. I've been trying to get my friends into these realms. Like this is based on this business is coming from my personality, my drive. So when you're talking about networking, it's like, why do people remember this? It's because I'm telling a story with like a clear vision and it resonates. It's like, it's who I am.
Yes.
So those, when you're trying to like network, have those. The next thing is just like, I'm not too big to talk to anybody. I'll talk to like 15 people a day, you know, 20 people a day. If someone wants to go for coffee, like let's do it, right? Like, and these meetings a lot of times they don't have any value, like intrinsically. There's nothing you're gonna get. You're just kind of getting to know somebody. Now, if you stop there, it can be a waste of time. However, there's a few things you can do in every conversation that lead to more value down the road. And so we're having a chat and it's like, yeah, what problems are you having right now? You know, people don't, you normally ask that. It's a weird thing to ask, right? Usually I'm trying to sell you on like what I'm doing, but it's like, what problems are you having? And so I make a note. So I have it in my notebook, you know, Tim working on bone broth, looking at digital marketing, going to do meditation. So like, I know this now, right? And so if someone comes up like, hey, my friend did a 6-week meditation retreat, I'm going to connect you, right? And so I just naturally now, having done this in crypto and other startups, I do this. And so that, like, the best thing is ask, like, what problems are you having? Make a note of it. Next thing is like, who are the interesting people you're talking to? So it's not, you know, we just have the meeting. It's like, yo, man, and this is why you wonder, like, oh, everyone I know seems to know Rob, is because I'm like pounding the pavement and I'm like, yo, Mike, who are the other people that are like doing this kind of stuff that are cool? And so one, you're not like getting cold leads. You're like, you know, if I ask you who the best 3 people are, they're probably awesome. Right? They're probably amazing across like any vertical. So then I'm asking for a warm intro from you. And then you introduce me and you're like, yo, this guy Robbie's really cool. So I now meet this person. I got a warm intro from you. I know we're on the same page. I'm going to find out what their problems are. I'm going to ask who I should meet. And like I've done this in crypto. I'm doing it in psychedelics. I've done this now in like wellness. You can do it in any space. And within like a few months, if you go hard at it, you really have your vision straight. You ask people like who the best people they know are. You remember their problems. It's like amazing how fast you can like make connections, but you really have to mean it. So it's not like, hey man, you know, do you want to meet this, you know, some meditation master like my friend Michael Paulo? It's like, I want you to get some value also. And then the more value you help with others, like for me to make an intro for you, it's 5 minutes, right? It doesn't take any time, but it's valuable for you. It's valuable for the person I made the intro to. So if you're a connector, one of the most valuable things you can do is make connections, and it's super high leverage on your time because you're helping people, you're building your network, you're coming across as a good person. It's just an email. So I firmly believe in like that strategy. And like one, you know, recent example of that, which for me, like I got into tech, I was reading about Twitter. I like loved Jack Dorsey and everything he did, you know.
Kind of look like him actually.
Yeah, he kind of like, you know, I was so my crypto my Twitter handle's Crypto Jesus.
Oh yeah,
I've been doing vipassanas, psychedelics, and like all of a sudden now
you're Crypto Jesus on Twitter.
Yeah,
I think I follow you.
Yeah. I've got a lot of big following. So he, you know, it was kind of like I was doing all these things with my own person, then all of a sudden like he had a beard and he was doing vipassana, and now he's in crypto, and I was like, shit, man, the guy stole my whole identity. But so he's like personal hero. Just love his thoughts on design and like how he's gone about building Twitter and Square. I think he's just like super thoughtful, really great leader, and always kind of was like, whoa, wouldn't it be cool to meet him? And so like when I started in tech around like 2008, 2009, like Twitter was just blowing up. And so reached out. I ended up helping somebody in the Ethereum ecosystem who had worked with him at Square. It was an early employee, and it was exactly the strategy of like listen to problems, help make connections. And she just said, hey, you know, if there's ever anything I can do to help, like let me know. And I knew she had worked with Jack, and I thought, you know, like he's probably interested in this Bonnie idea. Like, wouldn't it be cool to talk to him? He does all this stuff. Sent her an email with the pitch. You send it to him, and sure enough, he was like, yeah, I'm down to chat. So we had a discussion last week, video chat, and then like Jack Dorsey's like giving me feedback on like how to launch the product, what to include, how to market.
Wow.
Funny story. So that was like amazing example of like the type of people you can bring into your network with this strategy. Now it's really funny because the strategy I usually use, I actually was so nervous that I like fucked it up. And so I like immediately just started pitching my vision, getting into sales mode, trying to get his feedback. When like I had 30 minutes with this guy, I could have asked him like, what do you do socially? You know, do you get anxiety? Are you hanging out in these social situations? Like, what are they like for you? And I never asked him like, where's your struggle coming in?
Right. Like,
so
what are your problems?
So I don't know his problem. So now I can't reach back out to him like and help him. I don't know who to connect him. And maybe the guy's a billionaire, so maybe I couldn't connect him with anyone. But I don't even know. So like, what's the next steps to reach out? And so I feel like I kind of blew it because I was nervous. And so it just goes to show you like, got to stick with the practice and not be trying to like sell yourself, I guess.
Damn, bro, that's I'm learning a lot. And I mean, so where did you start to learn this in terms of like, so there's a couple things I want to ask is like, so the question of like, what are your problems? What are you dealing with? The thing about you is like, you're genuinely curious. Like, I just feel that from you, you know? And how were you able to develop that? Because even with just like so many strangers, you know, you have your own things you're doing, going through, and like, is it more of like so like, how did you come to that question? And also, why is it still very easy for you to ask from a genuine, like, you know, like you're very authentic with it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I think this is part of my nature and why this particular thing is like my superpower. Like if I could say like, you know, what am I good at? It's basically creating this vision, talking about the vision all the time, getting people like psyched about it, and then like connecting. And that's what I'm good at. And I think it stems from like young, my mom was like pretty hard on me, and which is like standard, but so I just didn't feel a lot of like self-love. It was like, oh, you're not good enough. And so always like, you know, in school, if I had the answer, I'd put my hand up and be like, hey, I want to show people I'm smarter, I want them to like me. Or like, I really wanted to have money when I was younger. It was like really important to me so I could like buy things so people would like me. So I just didn't have this like sense of self-love. So it's like this thought of like, oh, if I could help people, then they'll like me, you know? So it just kind of comes naturally as like, okay, how can I help? How can I connect? And it comes not from the greatest place. This is like a lack of self-love. And so in this case, it results in like a tool, but it's really like there's something there that I'm like working on of like, you know, just being more kind to myself. And so it kind of just helps feed this like this need, I guess.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And so when you come up with a vision for this center in this place, like how did you get so clear on it? Like how did you know that like this is, and whenever you're developing a vision, let's say, because you know you've built multiple companies and have gone through multiple projects, I'm sure that you know the vision is obviously the big thing, but where like what's your strategy or process in that, and really seeing
so that there's no like I don't care like what anyone says. I just firmly believe there's no way you can just be like, hey, this is the vision, and it's clear. Like it becomes clear over time. And I think as a recommendation to entrepreneurs out there, to anyone who wants to start their own business, there's an amazing set of podcasts called How to Start a Startup by Y Combinator, and it was put out like a few years ago, but still super relevant. And like one of the things that sticks with me is like just go to the user and look for these like experiences, look for this excitement. There's another book called Lean Customer Development by Cindy Alvarez, and it's just about like interviewing customers and listening for these wow moments.
Cool.
And so I was just looking for like, what is the wow moment, you know? And the more of these you see, you start to see where you can create something special. So that would be my recommendation is like, don't push the vision. Whatever you're selling, watch users use your product and like see how by using this product it can create like the wow moment, and then push for that.
Yeah. And what do you mean when you say wow moment? Like how would you?
So you know it when you feel it. So like, you know, for example, here in the ice bath, somebody's getting in the ice bath or getting out. Okay, they feel pretty good after. Did they even notice they feel good, or were they like, that's just cold, right? So it's an okay experience. All of a sudden, the ice bath has like some aromatherapy before people get in. They're kind of zoning in, you know? Now the ice bath has this like sound healing where people are like, wow, I could really anchor in and stay much longer. Now the ice bath has like people getting out, and we're making them feel into their body, you know? And now the response is like, I never thought I could do this for 3 minutes. I conquered my fear. I feel amazing. And the response is like, yo, I want to come back tomorrow. I want to come back the next day. And it's like, okay, like it's clear the wow moment's been created. This product is real. People love this. So it's just listening and looking for ways that you can start to create something that's like viral that people are going to talk about. Another example is like this breath work, right? So I went and learned how to do breath work from Geo. I went and experimented with a bunch of sound healing stuff, some of the best sound healers here, and incorporated a little bit of that. I went to some ecstatic dance classes and saw like, you can look around the classes and see like, you know, when it's truly like a 10x, like for me, something I did recently was like Y7 yoga. And it's an infrared yoga in New York in the dark, candlelight, with like music just hammering. And so it's more like a SoulCycleized yoga. So it's not traditional, so it's lost something in that sense. But in another sense, it's like, you know, they just let you freestyle in a flow. And in the flow, instead of like, you know, I didn't realize that I'd want to go at my own pace. Like usually you follow along in the class. When you realize like, oh, I can just stay in down dog as long as I want while the music is pumping. I was like, boom, like it hit me like, this is like a wave. This is a 10x experience. So then, you know, if I went to that, I would think about like what makes it that, and then try to take pieces and take elements. And so this breathwork we've created has like this group share I mentioned, which came from something else. It has the breathing, it has the ecstatic dance, it has the sound healing, it has a special meditation. So now like combining all those experiences, you know, people are like, it's insane, the response. So people are like full blown in tears, man. Like adult friends of mine, like, hey, I haven't felt love like this before, or like this was my return to innocence. And so then I hear that, and not only that, you know, people like, I've only offered this maybe 5 times, and you know, 40 people or so have been through, and I already have a queue for another 40 because people have just reached out like, yo, I want to bring my 8 friends. So it's just very clear to me based on that response that like that wow moment is there, right? And so it's looking in your customer's eyes, watching like what makes them like obsessed, and then just like layering into that.
Nice. Wow. Yeah, well, man, I think there's going to be something special that's going to be happening with this. So when's this place going to start developing this big facility?
Yeah, so a lot of risk on our end that we're
Yeah.
taking on financially to like
Yeah.
make this happen, but it's our dream. So
Yeah.
we've putting in together the team. So myself, my partner Miles, who's built Barrow, Dasha, some other hospitality chains downtown.
Okay.
Harry and Amanda, and we have a lease
Nice.
up in the Junction, just near Keele and Dundas. And we have our design team picked. So, designers, architect, GC, we kicked off the project yesterday.
Oh, wow. So it's just started.
Submitted a PPR to the city. We had a while figuring out like how to make it work with the city. And so now we're on
Zoning
good footing
and all
with
that?
zoning.
Yeah.
So now we're on good footing and we're ready to build. So we're putting together our drawings for permit. We're doing like a research trip around Montreal and Ottawa. Construction on the base build started. So I'm hoping that September of next year is a good date when we can launch.
Wow. Dude, sweet. And you don't know the name of it yet? It's not Inward?
No, I mean, so Inward came based on like 20 people coming in and experiencing this.
Yeah.
And we actually sent out just a Google Doc, like,
Right.
hey, we want people to feel this way when they come. We want them to think about this. And it was a name from a customer. Customer came up with it.
Nice.
And I just feel like when you have your early brand, your first 100 people, you're asking for feedback, people feel like, oh, I was a part of that brand. I helped come up with that name. I provided feedback. I saw the Google Doc. It was an unnamed place. And so, that particular one just kind of stuck because it was like, oh, you're going inward. Like that's what's happening when you're in the bath. And so I want to do that with the larger center, it's kind of like, this is what we're trying to do. And we'll just, send the Google Doc around to 200 people or whoever's come to this space and be like, yo, which of these resonate? And it's kind of like community led, brand and naming.
Sweet, man. Well, that's going to be super exciting. I can't wait for that. Basically.
How did you come up with Broya with that name?
It was a branding exercise with a consultant that it was more of like, let's just make it up. Let's make it a made up name. A lot of broth companies were called like Bone Broth Company.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to tie ourselves to just that, but I like how it turned out because it is like fun. It's like phonetically pleasing and easy to say, and people seem to like it. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Cool, man. So another thing that we connect on that I want to talk about is Vipassana and just like stillness, really. And you've done it a couple times now, right?
Yeah, so I've done 2 10-day Vipassana retreats, Goenka style, one in Israel, one in Alberta. And then I've served twice at the in-between course, just 3-day serving, where you're prepping for the next people, which is also a pretty mind-blowing experience. And I did that up in the Berry Center. And then I'm angling to do a third in February with my girlfriend.
Oh, nice.
We actually did the last one together, myself, her, and my co-founder from my crypto company. And that was his second as well. And since then, he went fully into the byte code of meditation and did 4 more 10-day retreats and then a 6-week.
Oh, this is the guy you
retreat.
were talking about.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Just his name's Sina.
Sina, yeah.
He's just, mind-blowing human. But just got so into it. Had a meditation coach. Went through these morning pages, which is there's a book called The Artist's Way. And
I've done morning pages. Yeah,
nice. And so he loved that. So his last year has just been like massive discovery around silence.
Wow, that's cool, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing the retreat over New Year's and then the 1 month in next March. So we're gonna have to connect after those. And
so you've signed up for the 1 month.
Yeah. I'm
Man, that's so legendary. Like I really, of all the practices, I think that silence is I don't want to say like the most effective, because they all have value, but it's definitely like you can really, I think, go deep into conditioned thought patterns and make changes. And I just have had such value from being still on a daily basis and going these deep retreats. So 1 month, like, man, so how did you decide like, oh, I'm going to make the time for this and then like cut the rest of your life off for a month?
Yeah, well, really because I've taken the step back from Broya this year, I've gotten it to a place where it's just easy to manage and it's still profitable and it's still kind of rolling. And so since I'm going through this transition where, like I'm just doing new things, I don't have a lot of responsibility. Like I don't feel tied to anything right now. And then this came up. It's at Spirit Rock. I put my application in. I got approved. And then I was just like, man, I got to do this, you know? Um, and so, yeah, it's definitely like a little nervous because it's like, well, I'm nervous because not a little, I'm very nervous, you know, because it's a month and I've only done 10 days. But also just like, yeah, going offline for a month is like, I do have a business, you know, that I do have to run, but you know, I'm putting the things in place for it to, and also like I'm, you know, potentially going through some partnerships right now with Broya that might unfold around that time. So anyway, I just, you know, the way I look at it is like, you're never going to have 1 month where it's going to be super easy to just like, you know, be like, oh yeah, no, this is fine, you know? So for me, it's like, if I don't do it now, maybe I'll never do it, you know? And just hearing you talk about your friend's experience with a 6-week earlier today, it kept like, what kept coming to me was like, yeah, dude, you got to do this. Like it's so obvious, you know? So when I feel that like kind of deep call towards it, I just got to do it, you know?
Man, that's amazing. So much respect. And also like what he was telling me was interesting is like there's a lot of people who are kind of 20 to 30.
Right.
And then there's a big gap of like at these 6-week events or 3 months events. And then like, you know, people over 50. And it's because of kids.
Right.
And so once you have kids, like a month away, like no way, right?
No
for possibly 15 years.
Yeah.
And so taking the time now, and you say, maybe I wouldn't have this time. Like, yeah, man, you know, this is it.
Right? Yeah,
so
exactly.
I can't wait to hear how it went.
Yeah.
But I want to get on the same path and do a month as well. I feel like with my girlfriend, we were actually mentioned this earlier, but when she's pregnant, I want to do it while she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And I feel like just sending that loving kindness to the baby,
beautiful,
like every day for 6 weeks or 1 month will be like so huge. So that's like definitely, I mean, I'm a bit of a crazy person, but that's in my mind is like, whoa, that would be really special.
That would be incredible, man. That's something I'm fascinated with, is actually this, like, you know, this birthing process. Like that 9 months it's a sacred time, you know, and I don't think we as a culture give enough love to it, you know? Like some people do, but I think there should be a whole practice around pregnancy, like a whole like lifestyle, a whole like, you know, it's just as similar as like, as you're creating this whole new social experience, I feel as though pregnancy should be this like whole thing, you know, that like you're really inviting this new soul into this life, you know, the manifestation of what was just energy, you know?
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be pregnant, and we haven't gone through pregnancy,
right.
so I'm not even going to comment on like what should or shouldn't be done. But
Totally.
I think it's really cool. I also had heard a lot recently about from this guy called Kingsbury.
Okay, I know that.
He was on Peter Attia's podcast talking about psychedelics and like cleaning up issues that have been handed down to you through generations.
Yeah.
And like the way you act a lot of times is environmental because of, you know, how your parents acted.
Yeah.
And so he was talking about using psychedelics to sort of get rid of these like weaknesses or things he didn't like before having a child. So he breaks the link.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, whether it's true or not, I don't know, you know,
Well,
but
actually,
it's in my mind, like, okay, this is your chance to heal before you have your child. Like, you know, there are things that you didn't like as a child, you know, are you going to pass on those same behaviors? And I find like, you know, I mentioned earlier that my parents or my mom was hard on me, and now I'm like hard on others I work with. So sometimes like I haven't cried in like 3 years. And the first time I cried was a couple of weeks ago, and it was because my girlfriend and I were working together, and I was like, you know, you're not working hard enough. And she started crying, and she was just like, you know, it's a personal story, but she started crying and was like, you know, it just hurts so bad that you're like not proud of me. And I was like, that's not what I meant at all. And I was like, holy shit, this is how you're being seen and showing up. And then I was like so scared. And then I started crying because I was like, wow, the person I love most in the world, you know, I just hurt her enough to make her cry. And then so I was like, whoa, if like you're going to act this way to your kids, like no fucking way. So now I'm like obsessed with this idea of like, okay, like get the healings. Like you have like 3 years and then you're going to have kids. So like, you know, therapy, meditation, whatever it takes, like, you know, gets not like fixed isn't the right term, but get like whole, you know?
Yeah. And actually in IFS, we call these things legacy burdens. And, you know, just as you're noticing is like that kind of like, hard, the part of you that's hard on people is like, that part took on that burden from your mom, it sounds like. And so, yeah, it's a very common thing that shows up. It's like when we ask a part that's holding a burden, where it picked it up from, where I learned this, it's like, oh, like it's actually not mine. It's from my mom or it's from my dad. It's like, okay. And then we would ask the part like, well, what percentage of that would you say is from your mom or dad? And it's like, usually it's like over 50%. Sometimes it's like the whole thing, you know, it's like, this is actually my mom's, like, it's not mine. And then we go through a process of inviting it to unburden through the lineage. And we like pass back the burden to the mom, and the mom passes back to who she picked it up from. And eventually we pass it back to a healing place or source or whatever. And yeah, I've seen it done just in my trainings, and I've done it with a couple clients too, and it's like, it's powerful, man. Yeah.
Man, so I guess, I mean, maybe you've talked about this on other episodes, but just for reference, like since I met you, it was the first I heard of IFS. Then I kind of heard it pop up with Tim Ferriss, you know. Then I went to Gabor Mate's seminar in Toronto,
nice.
and I heard him talk about it. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, what is this thing, you know? So I'm really curious. I'm looking now to start therapy, and not because there's anything wrong with me, but just to you know, be optimizing and like being as happy as I can. I'm like a firm believer in, like, you know, you're working out at the gym, you're eating healthy, why are you not working out your mind? So I guess question for you is like, how do I learn more about IFS? What's the deal, I guess? Yeah,
well, dude, I mean, obviously happy to do a session with you, like we scheduled, but do you want to know about it, like what it is, or do you want to just like...
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I don't know if you've talked about it before, but if your listeners are wondering, you know, for me personally, I was like, what is this? I kind of know a little bit about it from like the overview, but just curious if, you know, for people who are listening who are like, yo, this IFS thing, what was the next step? What do you do, I guess?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mention it sometimes, but yeah, I can dive into it. I mean, it's, so it is a therapeutic, but it's, you know, something I noticed that you said too was like, yeah, I'm thinking about doing therapy. It's like, not that there's anything wrong with me. And so you notice that part comes in that has a perception of therapy, even though like probably there's a part of you is like, there's nothing wrong with therapy. It's just to get to know myself. But notice how that word has that kind of connotation in like general society is like...
It's funny just on that, why I even brought that up here is because I know people will be listening and they're like, oh, well, he's going to do therapy because he's like broken. And I wanted to be just very clear, because my goal is like, it's this whole Banya experience, this it's like targeting a mainstream audience to get you into the present. And it's because everyone can benefit. And even like, you know, psychedelic or whatever type of therapy, it's because like you're trying to become better, or you're not, it's not for people who are like, hey, you're depressed, there's something wrong with you. It's for everyone. So that's just why I mentioned exactly to your point, because I just didn't want people to think like, oh,
of course,
you know, this isn't for me, I'm okay.
Yeah, of course. And it's, you know, it's important to mention, right? And because for me, I started doing IFS personally like 4.5 years ago or so, and I didn't feel broken. I just felt like I wanted to like really get to know some things around myself, you know, and I got to know things really fast, and like very interesting, noticing parts of me that are holding a lot of burdens, you know, a lot of like deep feelings of, you know, worthlessness, or just like, really, that was a big one around just not being enough, you know, and probably a lot of people resonate with that because we live in this rugged individualistic culture where it's like, you need to be this, you know, and so a lot of that is kind of not just, it's cultural burdens, which we actually like, we pick up just through culture, and not just like, you know, legacy burdens are another thing where we pick up just through our family. But yeah, it's, so a big thing about IFS too is that it's a non-pathologizing model. So like if someone comes and says like, I have depression, well, it's like, actually maybe there's just a part of you that feels depressed, like that feels like it needs to, like, it just feels down and it feels like low energy all the time. And that part is just like in your conscious awareness most of the time, because it's just trying to get your attention. And so we just get curious about that part. And so what IFS is actually, like what it believes or what it kind of states is that like the nature of the mind is subdivided. So we all have these multiple personalities, and these personalities within us, we experience them as like different voices in our head. And, you know, sometimes they don't get along, because every part has their own set of needs, wants, and desires, you know. And if there's no, like, coming back to like a shared vision, if there's no shared vision within yourself, within the system of the individual, then there could be a lot of chaos and a lot of conflict going on, not unlike a company, right? And so that, this is what really intrigued me about this model, was like, I want to when you're feeling some sort of inner conflict, or some sort of, just inner conflict, there's usually, it's because there are a couple parts that are just not agreeing on something, and they might not even know about each other, and so these parts, which are how we present ourselves in day-to-day life as, an individual, and as our identity of I am Tim, are what take the lead. But then the second big assumption around IFS is that we all have this like seat of consciousness, which is described and talked about in every religious and spiritual tradition, and they call it the self in IFS. And that self has qualities like compassion and clarity and connection and calm, and it's motivated towards harmony and bringing harmony towards these parts of us. So in Buddhism and Vipassana, like that, they talk about Buddha nature, or anatta, or the non-self, which is the same thing as the self in IFS. And really, that is the healer within all of us. And so we believe that in IFS, we come into this world with a self. Everyone has the same self. Everyone comes into it with the self. It's an undamaged essence, and it's not personal to anyone. It just is. And there's no gender, there's nothing. It's just the self, and it's the seat of consciousness within all of us. So when we go through getting to know these parts of us, the whole goal of this is to just sit in that seat of consciousness, sit in that awareness, and just notice these parts that come up. And so the main difference, I would say, from IFS and maybe what Buddhists talk about is that in IFS, they actually believe that the self naturally goes towards parts that are looking for attention. Whereas in Buddhism, it's more of an observer, passive witness, right? And things just naturally unfold when you sit there long enough. And, healing just happens when you sit there long enough. Because there's just, the parts say enough of what they need to say, and then eventually there's like, the space opens up so much, there's enough self there that something just like evaporates, and like there's some healing that occurs. But in IFS, we actually believe we can do it a little bit quicker. We can actually go towards these parts and just get curious from a place of self. And it's a beautiful thing too, this concept of self, and why I resonate with it so much in IFS, because although it's spoken about in every spiritual and religious tradition, you don't have to be spiritual or religious to believe in this concept, or to even like have an experience of it, because even the people who are like the most, let's say, polarized within, or like have so much conflict, or have never had an experience of, some sort of like self energy, we just ask them like, okay, so what are you noticing? It's like, oh, well, I'm noticing this like anger. It's like, okay, how do you feel towards that anger? And then they say like, I just want it to go away. I fucking hate being angry. It's like, okay, great. So it sounds like there's a part of you that's angry, and there's a part of you that doesn't like that angry part. Does that sound right? Yeah. Okay, great. So it sounds like there's these two parts here. So what would it be like if the part that doesn't like the angry part can just pull its energy back right now? And usually it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay, great. So now how do you feel towards that angry part? It's like, well, I'm kind of just curious why it's angry. And like, that's just a simple curiosity that's coming towards anger. And that actually allows that connection of self to part to get to know why this part's angry, and where it even started to become angry, why it feels like it needs to be angry, because there's a reason for it, and the reason is the reason is to help out the overall system. We just aren't aware why it does that in the moment until we bring that natural, genuine curiosity to it. Right. So then it's just like, now you have this like whole framework of like getting to know your parts on this level, and to me, it's been so helpful for me. And so, it's a lifestyle now. It's like, I can't get away from it anymore. If I feel pain, I immediately go towards it, and I just like breathe into it, and I just take a little bit of a moment and just get curious about it, and so, yeah, it just becomes this practice that it's part of my life now. Right.
Man, that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I heard Safi Bakal.
Oh yeah, cool.
On Tim Ferriss, and he was just mentioning a practice he does at night is kind of imagine all these different thoughts around like a boardroom table, and like, it's jealousy, and you say, hey, why are you jealous? And these things are trying to protect you. And you say, well, that's great. That's fine. Thank you for being jealous. And I'm going to go to bed.
Nice.
And, you let him have their say. And it's kind of like he intuitively has figured out this like IFS framework, right? So I'm really interested in this. And also it's really cool about like, oh, maybe that's what's happening during these Vipassanas, is that like, you feel so clean after and so crisp because every part of you has had a chance to like, have its attention, right?
100%. That's my experience. Yeah. Because when you like my personal experience in daily meditation practice, it's like a part just going off, and then it's like bringing the awareness to it and be like, okay. And then another part just going off. And it's like, my buddy used a great analogy about how he loves to actually go into the woods and hunt chaga and all this stuff. And he calls it like, he's like, you know what, man, when I go out there, it just like, it clears the cache, and to me, what he's talking about is just these parts that don't get the airtime from our day to day because we have certain parts that are taking the lead for the most part, like our managers that are getting shit done. They take the lead and they take so much space up that these other parts don't really get a chance to speak up. So when we give them that chance, like in Vipassana, then we come out of it just feeling like, whoa, like every part has been heard, and then you just feel this kind of peace and this calm and what I would refer to as just feeling a lot of self energy in your system.
Let's go, man. Let's get a session in, dude. I'm ready. I like this this like feeling into the pain and like kind of what I've realized the last 5 years on this journey through all these different, like similar to you, these different states is like just self-awareness, right? You're continuously peeling layers. Like, who actually are you? Like, what do you even want, right? And so when anger comes up, it's like, I'm angry. Like, what's happening, right? So I think I'm starting to kind of do this, and it feels interesting that you've come at this time because it feels like a good time to like, instead of doing this on my own, like what's actually happening. And I can really resonate with this, like, it's almost just being aware.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And having more awareness in your behaviors and who you are and being like accepting them.
Totally.
So I'm super down and super curious.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And just even like, I mean, I had an angry part recently come up very intensely for me in the last month. And
what happened?
It's like, no, so it's actually around this worthlessness thing again too. And so I have a part of me that feels not enough, just like feels worthless. And so whenever that part gets triggered, it feels really shitty. And then so when it's something else external is in my awareness, when that part's up and feeling like kind of low energy and down, this like really snappy, angry part comes up and it's just like, fuck off. Like, don't fucking talk to me, like doesn't say it, but I could just notice it. I used to like be a little more angrier as a child, but like now I don't project it externally. I could just like hear it now and catch it. But it's so clearly doing that to protect this part that feels worthless. Right. So it's pretty fascinating. And it gets triggered in certain situations in my life. And one of them is actually like playing squash with Mike Sanders. It's like, it's such a funny situation. Like because he beats me like every time. Yeah. And I get so close to winning and beating him, but like I just haven't been able to beat him. And I just notice this angry part come up sometimes and just like gets so like mostly like snappy internally and like very critical of me as well, critical of these other parts of me. So I'm very clear on this relationship and I'm like getting to know this angry part and almost like just inviting it in and letting it just like tell me how it feels, and so I've had some real deep connection with it. And I actually even just recently had an IFS session where I brought so much attention to this angry part, and I noticed that there was another part of me that was trying to suppress the anger, to be like, don't do that. That's not okay. Don't be angry. It's like you're that's mean. And so once that part that tried to suppress the anger pulled back, and I brought my attention to the part feeling angry, and actually witnessed him, I just started crying. Like so many tears just came out of me because this angry part was actually being witnessed for the first time, probably ever. Wow. In a way where it was like, whoa, someone's actually listening to me. So this angry part is not trying to be destructive. It's actually really trying to help as much as possible.
Who would have thought, man, the squash modality.
Exactly, man. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, man, it's super powerful, but I'd love to dive in with you sometime for sure. Yeah. Cool, man. Anyway, I know you have to get going. So
I got like 10 more minutes if you still want
cool.
to chat. So it's up to you.
Cool. Yeah. Anything else that kind of came into your awareness from?
What else could be cool to talk about? So, I mean, there's this like psychedelic clinic I'm working on.
Oh, right.
I just don't know if I want to like
dive too deep.
What to say, because I'm worried that like if some
legalities.
investors from the bathhouse like heard about this, how they would feel. But it's also my
we
dream.
we don't have to dive into that, but psychedelics in general would be cool to talk about, because you did just go to Austin. No battery. Okay, that's okay. We can just finish it.
We can finish this in. The video's done.
Yeah, that's
Audio's
fine.
done, right?
You know, we can do audio. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Those two record this one.
Yeah, we're just gonna finish with the audio because I still post the audio. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess something I'm really interested in is this, like, and it goes back to this vision of like the better social experience, right? And the better social experience is just kind of step one. And so if I look at most people, and this ideas come up, as most of my friends now are somewhat successful, and this drive of their early 20s to like be successful and make money has come true. And it's just very clear that there's nothing there. And so after a certain point of like financial security, it's like, what am I doing with the rest of my life? Yeah. And they're not happy, you know? And this is what was kind of like sold to you as you're young, that like, hey, if I had money and I have things, and like I'll be happy. And so some have families and are finding happiness there, but for the most part, like our society, I think, is baseline unhappy, and would say it's a result of like our phones, not enough creative time for our brain. Like we talked about phones already, but very much like this idea has really stuck with me, that if you have no boredom in your life, if all your attention is captured, there's no time for creativity. And so in the past, like you're using the bathroom, you're walking to the elevator, and now your attention is captured on your phone. And so I think that's leading to baseline unhappy. And so step one is what we're doing with the bathhouse concept, right? But that's only step one. Like, and I look at this as a funnel of like, normal, unhappy person, nothing wrong with you, but just unhappy, to like in the present, fully happy. And let's say that like meditation and psychedelics are tools I've seen that help accelerate your path to like happy person, but they're just not achievable. Like for most people, psychedelics are illegal. They're a drug, right? Even my mom, I've like given her this Michael Pollan book called How to Change Your Mind. For anyone who's listening, it's like the, sort of Bible for somebody new to the space around like what psychedelics are, what they do, what the research is. And she's reading it and she's like, Michael Pollan, like, he's a great author, and it's the only reason I'm reading the book, but like some of these studies, they don't seem sound. And I'm just like, what? Like, no, they're sound studies. Like, it's John Hopkins doing the research. Like, so I just think there's a huge emotional baggage around psychedelics, and meditation is just extremely challenging. Like we talked about stillness. People are afraid of a 10-day retreat. Many people I've talked to, I've been trying to push this, and the retention is just so low. Even if you're like extremely disciplined, it's low. So like, how do we then get people from A to, this goal? And this is what I want my sort of life's work to be. And it's just gotten me really interested in like, okay, which of those paths come first from this Banya space? So maybe you've experienced the present moment from the cold, the hot, the social experience, and you're thinking about what's next. So we started exploring with this breathwork, and this is really what this breathwork is about, right? And so was in Austin at a psychedelic summit, learning more about the state of the research, and experienced a chair that you sat in with haptic sound, transducers, a VR system, and a guided visualization.
Wow.
And it was pretty awesome. It wasn't amazing, but it was pretty awesome, and showed what could be, to me, is the future, is experiences geared around psychedelics. So would love to see somebody build, the new age branded clinic, looking at it from the side of like moving people through this funnel. So it's not a clinic you go to because, hey, I have depression. It's, I'm a healthy normal. I know what the present moment is. I need guidance on the next step. And so I go to this clinic, and it also has like what I'm calling the Soho House aesthetic. It has group therapy that's done in a community. It has intention setting and reintegration and like sauna and ice bath. I think it will work hand in hand with what we're doing, and the therapy design itself is designed around like sound and entertainment with these type of chairs. So I'm really starting to get excited again when we were talking about like leaning into the experiences, right? And seeing what's happening, the impact these things are having on people. Like for me, it had an enormous impact on my relationship, the way I show up as a human, what I care about, my desire to do charity. I don't know if we have time to get into it, but after a psychedelic trip, I ended up doing a charity event that raised $200,000 in a single evening, where we connected a Christmas tree to the blockchain, and it, every time somebody sent ether to the account, the Christmas tree lit up, and that, sort of came as a result of wanting to give back more. And so I just think these things are so helpful in so many ways, but the way that they're marketed, or you can do them now, isn't the greatest. And so I also starting to have a huge vision around how something like this might look. So really excited about like the inward space. To me is like what a space may look like. So really interested in like kind of looking deeper there.
Nice. Damn, bro. This is great, man. I'm really excited we've crossed paths, and just like every time we hang out, there's always like an exciting new development. And yeah, man, I think the future is bright.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. That was really cool.